Hi, everybody, and welcome to this latest Pepper podcast. On January 4th, Attorney General Jeff Sessions issued a memo to all U.S. attorneys discussing marijuana enforcement. The one-page memo rescinds previous DOJ guidance on marijuana enforcement, and it has been seen by some of Sessions' crackdown on the legal cannabis industry. Today we're speaking with Alva Mather and Jay Dubow, leaders of Pepper's Cannabis Industry Group, about the Sessions memo and its impact. Alva and Jay, thanks for joining me. Attorney General Sessions' memo made waves in the news this time last week. Can you explain what the memo says?
The Sessions memo revokes prior guidance from the Department of Justice that had gone out to the U.S. attorneys and to the Department of Justice prosecutors that had given some guidance as to permit or to not have prosecutions of certain state-authorized cannabis and marijuana businesses.
Now, the memo lists previous DOJ guidance that has now been rescinded, including the 2013 Cole memo issued by then Deputy Attorney General James Cole. What is the Cole memo, and how does the new guidance from Sessions affect it?
Well, as Jay said, the main thrust of the Cole memo was that it set certain enforcement priorities for DOJ prosecutors when faced with marijuana businesses within their jurisdictions. And what it said was that it recognized first that the DOJ has limited resources and needs to be thoughtful about where it's going to be dedicating its resources, and really instructed U.S. attorneys and other federal prosecutors to focus on major issues. And it articulated 8 priorities in that memo, which were making sure that marijuana was not being sold to minors, that it was not being diverted from states in which it was legal to states where it was illegal, and also other major law enforcement priorities such as firearms or drugged driving. And what the Sessions memo has now done is taken that guidance off the table and given full discretion to U.S. attorneys on a state-by-state basis to prosecute medical or recreational marijuana growers, dispensaries, businesses, in the same way that they were pretty much prior to the Cole memo and the legalization, and thrusting that back on the individual U.S. attorneys to make that decision on whether or not and how to prosecute.
Now, the majority of states permit marijuana for medical use. How does the Sessions memo affect those state programs?
Well, the medical has been protected not just from the Cole memo, which we were just discussing, but also there has been an appropriation rider that was put into the federal budget starting in 2014, and it has been renewed each year thereafter, which essentially says that appropriations to the DOJ cannot be used to prosecute medical marijuana industries within the states in which they are compliant. And in fact, there was a significant decision by the Ninth Circuit after the appropriations rider was first put in place to make clear that the DOJ could not and would in fact be enjoined from going after folks that were otherwise compliant with state laws as a result of that appropriations rider. So there are continued indications that that rider will be put forward for the upcoming budget, but we don't have a federal budget at this point. If history is an indication, it should still be there, and that would afford a degree of protection for medical marijuana businesses despite the new Sessions memo, but there's no guarantee, obviously, at this point, as many factors are being negotiated as part of the upcoming budget.
So 8 states have legalized the non-medical use of marijuana, including California, where recreational use became legal just on January 1st. Other states, like New Jersey, are set to legalize recreational use this year. How will the new DOJ guidance affect legal recreational marijuana?
Well, I think that's the main question, and the point that the Sessions memo really drives is that it's going to be left to the states and the U.S. attorneys for each states to decide whether or not they want to change their own priorities to go after otherwise legal marijuana operators. So at the end of the day, what you have is uncertainty within the market, and right now, just as an indication, some U.S. attorneys have come forward to say that they are not going to change their enforcement priorities, some that you would expect, such as Colorado and Oregon, where marijuana has been legal and is a big business on the recreational side. But then you also have the new U.S. attorney for the state of Massachusetts, which recently legalized marijuana recreationally, not being willing to take a position that they will not be now enforcing under the federal laws folks that are otherwise compliant on the state law. So there's a lot of uncertainty, unfortunately.
So let's turn from the cannabis industry to those other industries that support cannabis businesses. How does the Sessions memo affect banks, investors, and other service providers working with the cannabis industry?
So as Alva was referring to the recreational use, with regard to these other types of support businesses, there is an increased risk or perceived increased risk as a result of the Sessions memo. It's going to be riskier to provide these types of services and goods to cannabis businesses. Companies that do provide those services, many of them are more established types of businesses that may choose to not provide such services and avoid risk, for example, of aiding and abetting liability until this gets sorted out. With regard to banks, similarly, many banks, most banks actually, avoided doing business with the cannabis industry. There's a minority of banks who have been willing to do so, and most of those are much smaller banks. After the Cole memo had come out, there was some guidance from FinCEN, which oversees reports that are required for the anti-money laundering financial institutions, as a way to comply with those requirements. A memo was issued that permitted a suspicious activity report in a lighter format for legalized marijuana businesses. As a result of the new Sessions memo, it's unclear whether the FinCEN guidance previously issued is still good, and it will likely result in banks and other financial institutions that were possibly thinking about getting into the cannabis business, holding off until there's more certainty as to the impact from the Sessions memo and what's going to happen on a going forward basis.
So, Alva, you mentioned this already, but I wanted to revisit it. We've already seen some pushback from both political parties, including from Representative Cory Gardner, the Republican from Colorado. What is the political impact of the Sessions memo, in your view?
I think first and foremost, you're going to see state governors in jurisdictions like Colorado, where it has been legal, having to come out with a degree of force to say that they cannot be supportive of turning back the tide, so to speak, on enforcing medical marijuana. Obviously, it's a big open question, but in my view, I think this may be the straw that breaks the camel's back in terms of forcing the hand of Congress to take a different position on the federal treatment of medical marijuana, given the fact that there is a very large industry across the state in terms of supporting these businesses. Also, if you look at public support numbers, more than half, as much as 70% of Americans support full recreational marijuana with appropriate regulatory controls, as has been put forward in the states where it's become legal. I also think another possibility that we will see is whether or not the appropriations rider that has been in place for medical marijuana might also be extended to protect recreational marijuana in those jurisdictions in which it has been supported under state law as a compromise position. But I think Sessions has stirred the pot, so to speak, in a way that there was a comfortable looking the other way for many lawmakers for a long time, because even though the federal government was unwilling to take a position that they were relinquishing the right to prosecute these crimes, the Cole Memo and other guidance was giving direction that really was not where their attention and resources were going to be directed.
Yeah, I'd just like to add my view, I think, and I agree with Alva, and it's just sort of put a finer point on some of that. You've got the majority of the states have some form of legalized cannabis, most of which are medical, but some, as we've discussed, are recreational as well. You have Canada having legalized cannabis. I think based on statements that have been made by both sides, that Republicans and Democratic legislatures have made comments in support of the industry, that it is likely that we'll see some kind of bipartisan action to at least medical marijuana, national level approved for use, then potentially recreational as well. Alternatively, you may just see a reclassification of marijuana as no longer being a Schedule I drug, which would then open up other ways for it to be legal at the state level.
Alva and Jay, thanks to both of you for joining me. For our listeners, be sure to check out the Insight Center at pepperlaw.com for more podcasts and articles from our cannabis industry group, as this is a fast-moving industry.